Just to kick things off, for those of us that aren't familiar with FOMO Pay, why don't you just give us kind of the elevator pitch, so to speak, of what FOMO Pay is and what you guys do exactly?
Okay, sure. Just a quick introduction about FOMO Pay. For those know FOMO Pay or don't know about FOMO Pay, so we are a one-stop QR code provider for the enterprise client. So basically, if you saw some of the merchants, they are accepting the QR code payment. Actually, we are the one providing the infrastructure behind, including the WeChat Pay or NetsPay or even the M-Visa standard. So we are the provider for this infrastructure.
That's great. And you and Louis founded the company back in 2015. Where did you see the opportunity? How did you come up with the idea and say, hey, this is something that's underserved, or I see an opportunity here?
Okay, sure. So actually in 2015, actually even 1 year before this, where actually we saw the opportunity is where the mobile payment it's really come to replace the traditional, let's say, cash or check or card payment. So if people have been to China recently, maybe let me just have a show of hand who have been visiting China in recent 3 years. Okay. Wow, I think I
thought there would be more people, actually.
So how many of you have heard of the WeChat Pay or Alipay? Okay, I think most of you. Yeah, so that's where actually we get the ideas from. So back in 2014, we say that what's happening in China, it's really changing your mind. Traditionally, we all have a card, and we are actually, especially like as a typical Singaporean, you think actually we are fair enough. We have more than 4 credit cards in my pocket, so I can use it everywhere. But for the typical person in China, if I want to use my credit card in any one of the merchant, the first one, the merchant might not accept it. The second one, I might not, if let's say for typical, let's say, Chinese or something, it may take me, let's say, 1 month or 2 months to get one credit card. So the credit card usage is very low, both in consumer side and the merchant side. So that's why mobile payment is changing the rule by enable this so-called the wallet acceptance to more and more unbanked people. So for the one who does not really have a credit card, who can only accept cash as a merchant, now can use WeChat Pay or Alipay. So this is what's happening back in 2014. So now already 3 years or 4 years, you can see that everywhere in China now is accepting this mobile payment. Even for the temple, they accepting donation, no longer accepting the coins or cash, because they know that people do not have cash anymore. So they also accepting the QR code. So if you go to some of the, like a hawker center, or even worse than that, even go to some village in China, yes, they do accept the QR code. And also, even worse case, for some beggars just on the street, you want to give them some coins? Sorry, I don't really accept that. I also have my QR code. So that's really what's changing the world.
Yeah.
And that's also where we see the opportunity is happening back 3 years before. We are the one actually who developed the first kind of like a QR code payment system in Singapore. And we also bring the first one who is already very popular from China, which is WeChat Pay in Singapore. And we are the first one who launched the WeChat Pay acceptance in Singapore here. And right now you can see that most of the merchants, that's in Changi Airport or MBS or some of the typical tourist places, all accepting the WeChat Pay QR code. And also during the last year, you see that in the National Day rally, PM Lee also mentioned that Singapore is moving towards a smart nation. And one of the key points for this smart nation is to being cashless. And the QR code is also one of the key initiatives they are doing. So under the SGQR initiative, so we are also trying to develop the common QR code for Singapore. And not to mention that you will see that actually NetsPay, GrabPay, they are all trying to change the rule that is playing in Singapore here. So this is something that as a consumer, maybe you will not see what we are doing right now, but potentially in next 2 or 3 years, you will see what actually FOMO Pay is trying to play the rule that you are living.
Yeah, and it's pretty interesting. Just to touch on that point, Nets, we were talking about this earlier, but by the middle of this year, Nets here in Singapore was saying that they want to have QR code payments rolled out through all vendors. And that's what we're actually moving towards. Just want to go back to your other point that you were making about cashless transactions and the unbanked population. The unbanked population in Asia is huge. And you see a lot of companies, there's like Coins.ph in the Philippines is targeting the unbanked population using blockchain and Bitcoin. But in China, China's really a unique story because WeChat and Alipay, China's actually really kind of in some ways been the leader in cashless transactions. And initially when you guys set up here, you were really kind of trying to target the Chinese tourists that were coming to Singapore that really couldn't buy things here because they didn't have the right credit card or, they didn't want to bring a whole lot of cash, right?
Yes. Yeah, actually that was the initial idea because during at that time, no one, especially no Singaporeans, is comfortable to use the QR code, especially for the payment. If I say I ask you to make the payment through the QR code, sorry, I don't know what's that, and I don't even trust how to
blank
make
stare.
this one.
People are like, what's that?
But once actually we get someone who get used to this one, to use it, which is a Chinese tourist. Okay, now Singaporean start to observe. Okay, now in Singapore, someone is at the counter using the QR code, so they want to check out. Hey, what's that? So actually now more and more people want to understand what's the QR code and also what's the convenience behind. Yeah, that's how actually we're also trying to educate the market.
Yeah, so you're really kind of going through a lot of scaling. You signed up like 1,000 vendors in the first year or something, I remember reading, right?
Currently actually there are more than 2,000 accessible points in Singapore here.
That's great. Alan, I want to shift to you. How did you come about to learn about FOMO Pay and get involved in the business, and what actually attracted you to come on board in kind of the early days of the company?
Okay, so I had a previous startup. So the startup, we were an accelerator together. So we were in the DBS accelerator in Hong Kong, and that's where I met Zack. My startup, unfortunately, didn't succeed. I guess we're just one of the statistics, and we had to basically make the hard decision of actually closing down the organization for a variety of different reasons. And so basically, I knew Zack from the accelerator in Hong Kong, and I was mentioning earlier. Closing an organization is just as hard as actually opening it. So you have to let the staff go. It's pretty hard. You have long-term contracts in place with your vendors. There's a lot of clauses, break clauses. It's a terrible experience to actually go through. Anyway, during the process of closing down, I had to get rid of the office furniture. So I called Zack to see if he'd be interested in picking up my office furniture. So he rocked up with 4 people from the FOMO Pay team, and I had to turn around and basically grab stuff because they kept putting it in their pockets and purses and so on. So anyway, they bought a couple of tables and a couple chairs and computers, and along the way they actually asked me to join FOMO Pay. Now I have to admit that I've never used WeChat Pay or Alipay or any of these QR payments. So my company's being closed probably in September and October. So the agreement that I had with Zack was let's use the next 3. They asked me to join, and let's use the next 3 months to see if we in fact like each other. So I thought it was kind of important that we could get along if we worked together.
Yeah, we were dating at that time.
Yeah, it was the dating
phase. Courtship
phase.
period, yeah.
And also to see if I could actually add value, because again, I'm not from this space. My background is slightly different than the payment space. So 3 months went by, and we basically I decided to join, or they extended an offer. I don't really know which way it actually worked. And now it's been about 1.5 years, and it's been a lot of fun. They've got a fairly good team. They've got an exciting product, and they actually have a compelling value proposition. So it's been a little bit different than the experience that I had with my organization.
Yeah, and what's the current staff size that you have right now?
Okay, what do you mean current?
How many people do you have in the team now?
Okay, right now actually we have office of 2 floors in Robinson Road, around 20 plus full time, and not including part time.
That's great. What were those early days like when you and Louis started it back in 2015? You know, those early hurdles and challenges that you had to go through, you know, setting it up, developing all the product applications, the marketing, finding the office space. Tell us a little bit more about that time period for you and how you overcame some of those challenges.
Okay, sure. I think one of the challenges I can share, just can continue Alan's story, is actually to try and find the right person. Because I think maybe few of the audience here is also running your own startup. So actually you will find one of the really challenging stuff is to find the right person, right partners to run a corporate or just run a project or team with you. And personally, I was from the engineering background, and also few of my co-founders none of them are from the so-called financial world. So actually, doing the business expansion for the first prototype, it's okay that we do not pay a lot of attention to the, let's say, risk or compliance side. This one at the early stage is still okay, but at a certain stage, you must find someone really expert or someone really specialized into this industry. That's where actually we also met Alan. We found actually Alan, he had more than 20 years experience in the banking and the finance. So actually we know that Alan's experience, at least he knows a lot of rules how to play in this financial background. And that's where actually we find, okay, there is some synergies in between us. But at that time, we find, okay, Alan is the right person, but how can you convince the right person to join your team? It's another story. For most of the people, actually, we have talked to, because as a startup, you must meet people every day. Especially, you must meet a lot of people potentially who can work with you. So for some people, actually, it's very easy to convince them. Well, when you just tell them, wow, you can just imagine how big is the market of mobile payment, or how big the market now is, how hot is the fintech, this world. So they will say, okay, why not just give it a try or something. But Alan, since actually he is staying 20 years in banking, he is not the one very easy to be convinced. The only thing can convince him is time. So that's why actually Alan took us almost, I think, 3 months to convince him to finally join us. Yeah, so that along the way, actually, you will also find some other people who you think maybe, yeah, they want to join you, but they might not be the right person, or maybe someone, they are the right person, but out of some reason, you cannot really marry to each other. That's also another problem. So
not everyone's meant for each other.
yeah, so I think really the talent or the team is one of the key challenge, especially not only in an early stage or even in a growth stage. It will always be a challenge for you.
And Alan, how that 3-month period where you're going through kind of that courtship with FOMO Pay, you come from a banking and finance background, but not necessarily the technology background that you guys were aiming for. What was that period like, and was there a moment that you can remember where you said, I'm going to join this company full time because I see the potential here and whatnot?
All right, I'm a bit uncomfortable because you guys keep using this word courtship, but so I mean the long and short of it is I know at the time I knew nothing about payments. My background is more on the wholesale banking side, and while I did have a fintech firm, it was in a different space. So the question for myself was not only did I actually like these guys and would I be able to work with them. They're half my age, and they're Chinese. I'm not. There's a lot of differences. So the question was, would we actually get along? But then the other thing that was kind of important for me was, would I be able to add value? Would I actually have something that could add value to the franchise? So that was part of it, and convincing myself that I could actually add value. I think that frankly the jury is still out. So it's been a year, but in the life of a firm, basically a year is very short. So it's still early days.
That's great. And yeah, I mean, it takes people a long time actually to get situated and settled into a role and whatnot. So, I totally agree with your point that a year is not a very long time. You guys want to talk a little bit and shift about the accelerator. You guys were part of Oracle Cloud Accelerator. For the other people that are considering applying for an accelerator or jumping into one, what's some advice and lessons can you share about how you knew it was the right time or it was a good accelerator to be in and whatnot?
Can I take this one? So I think now looking back, we made a fundamental mistake with our accelerator. So the main purpose of us going into an accelerator was to get DBS as a client or raise funds. I think both admirable things. I think both were very hard to actually do. I think to use the accelerator properly as a learning experience, if I could go back in time and do it again, I would use that. So the question is basically do an honest assessment of what your skill gaps are. So for FOMO Pay, we do a lot of work with compliance in terms of AML, KYC, and there's certain things that I don't actually know, and I have to spend a lot of time researching. Now, if I was back when we were in the accelerator together and I had access to the DBS compliance people, maybe I could have resolved that much more quickly. I think pragmatic business aspects were the things that if I could do it again, I would do if I would go into an accelerator. So where are the holes in our business plan, and how can they actually help us, other than basically DBS becoming our client, or basically DBS introducing me to money to raise funds. So basically building out the infrastructure footprint.
Yeah, I think Alan made a very good point. It's actually don't just rely too much on the accelerator, because eventually it's just to accelerate your business. But if you don't have really a ready business to grow or something, then accelerator also that cannot really help you to in terms of this. But one thing that is good about the accelerator is actually, I'm not sure Michelle is still here. Okay. So
I think she's around here.
Okay.
Somewhere.
Okay. So Michelle is the one actually who really, I think she invites us very early to join the Oracle startup. Initially, actually, we also don't know what's the point of Oracle startup, Oracle accelerator startup accelerator program. Because before this one, we already participated one in DBS accelerator program. So why should we just participate this again? And also, especially doing the Oracle final pitch, final presentation, all the judges there are the tier 1 VC. And most of the VC, they think this is a very good project, and they all invite me for a private session after the pitch. And
there's Michelle.
Okay, Michelle, we were sharing the story about the.
We're talking about Oracle Cloud Accelerator.
Yeah, Oscar. Yeah. So actually, the first question when all of these investors they just meet me privately, they ask me, "Why you joining Oracle program?" I was really surprised. Oh. You are the judge of this accelerator program, but you still ask me this question. Just for your reference, because some of the people, they also don't know that what's the point of accelerator program. But it's only when you are selected, when you work with the people from the Oracle, when you work with the different team in the Oracles, you will start to find the synergies. So before really you find out what's your business about, don't join any accelerator, but to find your business model, what's your revenue model first. But when you are ready to scale, I think there is no harm to join any accelerator.
I think that's a really great point. No matter what accelerator you're applying to or thinking of joining, they're not going to be the panacea and fix everything and magic's going to happen. You have to have a viable product and a business and an idea that you can actually execute on, rather than we're going to join this accelerator and they're going to fix all of our problems and give us, all this business and whatnot. And you have an interesting perspective, I think, because you've done 2 accelerators now.
Actually, even more than that.
Even more than that, okay. But that's pretty interesting. I want to talk a little bit, and then we'll open up the floor to Q&A about fundraising. You guys have raised funds. You haven't disclosed the amount. What was that process like? Because this is something that a lot of us want to hear about because a lot of us won't have experience raising funds or we don't know what to do exactly. How did you find that process and find the right partner to invest in your company?
I think Alan was an investment banker before, so I think it's a good question for you to answer first.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is messaging. So basically being able to articulate to somebody what is your business about, what is the compelling value proposition. During the fundraising process, both with FOMO Pay and my prior company, spent donkey hours basically putting together PowerPoints and trying to refine the message so that people could actually see that this thing was some sort of fantastic opportunity, and then perpetually putting the numbers together in terms of how much revenue is this going to generate, why is that number realistic, what is my funding waterfall, what happens if this doesn't actually happen. So basically, putting together the funding deck is an extremely painful process, but sort of a necessary process to actually go through. Then the other thing that I think is worthwhile is basically if you do find investors that are interested, and if you find more than one, find several investors and basically create a little bit of competitive tension, so that you're not left at the mercy of one particular investor. It really is, it's about basically marketing, it's about getting your name out there and about basically articulating why you have a compelling business story. The last company, we thought we did a fantastic presentation, and basically at the end of the day he goes and he said basically they ran our numbers through the model and they couldn't get their head around how we were going to get traction. And in our mind, it was very clear how we were going to get traction. But he turned out to be right and we turned out to actually be wrong. So what you do is basically for fundraising, the key is to get revenue going, have contracts signed, and just basically focus on business development, because if the business has revenue, it basically the funding becomes that much easier. It's very hard to raise off of a white piece of paper with all the things that you're going to do.
Yeah, and I think if anybody watches Shark Tank, for instance, a lot of that holds true in the companies that you see pitch in front of the sharks and whatnot, the ones that actually have some traction. Final question from me, and then we'll open up the floor. Western markets like the United States and Europe adopting QR code payments, Asia seems to be the leader right now, and you guys are on the forefront of leading that charge. Do you see, the United States, for instance, you're sitting up here with two Americans, adapting the QR code system, because like when I was just in the US, it doesn't really seem like it's that prevalent. There's like, oh, we accept Apple Pay, but people aren't really using it. How do you think that's going to play out in the Western markets?
Actually, this one is a little bit interesting. So even for, actually I used to work in Apple. Apple, everyone knows that Apple also has the Apple Pay. But inside the campus in San Francisco, Apple campus is the only one who are accepting Apple Pay. So even in the, you can call it the hometown of Apple Pay, not really the merchants, they are accepting the so-called
changing consumer behavior.
Yeah, so the really key about the payment or about the so-called the fintech space is to do the education. Because this is something, yes, in the previous financial world, everyone already have its own lifestyle. If I use to cash, yes, I prefer, this is a safer way to make the payment. If I used to use cash, use check, then I will continue to use the check. But I don't really want to spend this opportunity cost unless there is really something that is going to change my mind. And also this is what's happening in US. Because the US people are really satisfied with what they already have right now. But this is totally different with the people in developing country. Why Chinese people, they want to use QR code? One major reason, their note is too small. For those who went to China, you must know that the largest note in China is just 100 yuan. It's equal to like 20 Sing dollars. But since now the buying power of Chinese is too huge, they are buying the world. So if let's say you want to go to some luxury place, wow, if you want to spend let's say 100K, you need to count the note one by one. So that's
they have the cash counters on a lot of the counters in the stores.
So that's something impossible for all of them. And the worst case is there are fake notes in between. So how are you going to deal with it? So this is why people in China, they decide to give up with the cash. And also so does the India market. So for those actually who from India, you must know that Paytm is very popular in India. And even more than Paytm, there are 84 wallets in India. And the latest one, just launched last year in India, was done by Google. So even more and more wallets is still coming to India market. The main reason is also they don't want to use cash. Because they have some challenge with their existing payment mode. And this is where the opportunity is coming. For the market, let's say like Hong Kong, Australia, US, yes, I think people, they really reluctant to change. We are fine with it. But we can just change where the opportunity is already there. And later on, when now Donald Trump, okay, I think he's very satisfied with what US now can do. But now in this fintech space, China is really leading the change of the world. So later on, I see this is where the place I think maybe the developing country got a chance to lead the world.
Very good point. In the U.S., we're pretty slow. We only just made EMV chips mandatory, and even a lot of vendors there don't even, you still got to swipe the card and everything, so we're a little bit late to the game, but completely agree with you. I'm going to open up the floor to questions right now. Sean's going to take my microphone away from me, and who's got a question? We talk about fintech, security, payments.
First off, thanks so much for your talk. Super interesting to hear about it. I'd love to get your take on cryptocurrencies and what your kind of strategy is on them, if you have one at all yet.
Okay. So for the cryptocurrency, or maybe I just put a more generic term, just a blockchain technology. So this one is something very close to payment. And it's just the labor to us. But the problem of the blockchain technology is where is the application of the blockchain technology? Everyone knows that this one is a very good technology, and we need to use it, but how? All the banks now they are looking for, yes, blockchain is very good for me, but how should I make it useful for my existing business? That's where actually the problem statement is. So actually, the whole business world should run like there is a problem, so I need to solve this problem first. And the blockchain technology is a general ledger system. So the good thing about it, it's trackable, it's traceable, and also it's transparent, it's decentralized. And so this feature can solve which problem. And one of our very good application of this is supply chain finance. So this one is already implemented by some of the banks. And another one is also cross-border transaction. So this is also something implemented by either blockchain technology or someone also using some cryptocurrency to do so. So this is where actually it's all very close to us. So it's just a matter of time actually where we make this application into our existing business.
Can you share with us for the next couple of years what are the plans that you have with FOMO?
Sorry, you mean what's our clients?
Your business plans. I mean, in terms of what are you looking into? You know, in terms of just growing, or there's a potential technology change. What are you seeing for your company?
Like scaling the existing business, or,
Yeah.
moving into new lines, revenue streams.
So, I mean, basically, so the question to the audience is, what are we? I mean, are we a technology company or are we a payment company? We're fundamentally a technology company. That's the way that we look at ourselves. So the reason that we do the payment side, the merchant acquiring, building out the merchant base is to prove the technology. As Zack mentioned, we have this, let's say we rolled out the technology and we had no merchants. How would we get people to sort of adopt our technology? So fundamentally what we're looking to do is we're a technology provider. We're providing the infrastructure for the technology rails, providing the facilities for B2C payments and eventually B2B payments. We've basically built a very good foundation on how to roll out this model within Singapore. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to focus on geographic expansion. So basically working with other partners to basically spread out across the region. That's really where we're actually going is to move from a Singapore play to a regional play to, I mean, it's 3 years is an eternity in this space.
Can I ask, like, during your very early days when you started FOMO Pay, how was like your MVP kind of stage? You know, when did you like move towards an accelerator and like before the accelerator? In fact, the question is, can you share more about the early days, of FOMO Pay?
Okay. Actually, during the early days, let me check what's the earliest. I think the earliest date, because this is, truth be told, this is not my first startup. So actually, I started this company when actually we just brought over some of people from my another startup. So I think at that time there were 5 or 6 of us. So during that time, yes, actually it's life is not easy. So only 5 of you guys. So basically, one man can do a job of like 10 months doing. But one of the key challenges for us doing daily is to keep our eyes on the new opportunities. So during that times, if let's say you only stay in your office, you just focus on, let's say, market research or something, but you will never know what's happening in the market. So during at that time, we are still not sure about what's our business model, or we are still not sure that whether this is a feasible business or this is some business is going to be scalable. Actually, we also run some events similar to today's this event. We also invite a lot of like other startups to for like a networking event. At the first event, actually there are around like 20 startups. So basically, we also have some questions about the startups, how to run these startups. So we share with the fellow startups. And actually, some of them, they also, it's not their first times to run startup, or sometimes they are like a professional, just a manager. At that time, actually, I got one of my friends who just shut down the Easy Taxi, who was the previous competitor with Uber and Grab. So actually, he got plenty of experience to share with us. And especially, it's the failure experience that's really helped us a lot. So actually, we learned a lot from all of these fellow startups. And we have run, I think, that event for almost 7 or 8 times. So through that event, actually, we know a lot of startups. And we first thing is to learn the experience from it. And along the way, since we finally found like what's the business model, and we also find some of the partners help us to scale the business. And most importantly, we also find some talents within the groups. And also, when we actually grow this network, because it's all startups, we also find some investors who are interested in this community, and we are able to build up the ecosystem. So when you are faced the challenges, actually, just remember you are not alone. Find someone had the same problem before, or just find someone who are facing the same problem. Yeah, I think that's how actually we survive in our early days.
Very good advice.
Thanks so much for sharing. It's been really interesting. Wanted to ask you a question about how your team makes decisions. In my short time in startup land, it seems like there's a real tension between wanting to react and move very quickly, but also creating a space where you're bringing your team with you and making sure that you retain top talent by giving them a sense of ownership in the process. So if you have any lessons or things that you think you're doing that's cracking that, I would love to hear that.
I think maybe, Alan, you want to share how decision making is in some larger organization or something?
The decision making is basically by guess. So, I mean, a lot of the things that we're doing, we're encountering a new space. It's all greenfield, and we have to decide, are we going to turn left? Are we going to turn right? I don't know how to answer it better than that. As a consensus. I think basically to have a disagreement in opinion is somewhat constructive. I mean, but what happens is, sometimes, I guess it's normally me since I'm not a founder. Sometimes we don't get our way, but then what we have to do is we have to basically, once we pick a decision, that's the decision that we're all going in. I don't think you can ever get consensus where basically everybody understands why we're doing this and this is really the right reason. And I mean, fundamentally, I think what you do is you make more wrong decisions than right decisions. And the question is the decision being thought out and thought through? And I think probably in the land of startups, it's very hard to sort of know what the right answer is supposed to be. It's just greenfield, you're negotiating a contract and how should you basically put the rate, because obviously everybody that you're dealing with is sometimes bigger than you and they say, well, you should do this for free because we're a marquee client. Is that the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do? The fundraising, basically, is this the right value? Is this the wrong value? How much equity do you want to give up? How much should we pay people? At the end of the day, there are so many decisions to be made. You have to have certain people that are sort of subject matter experts, or the ones that basically guess at what the right answer is and then everybody sort of follows. So I think basically given the amount of work that we have, there really isn't that much time to make sure we're all basically thinking the same thing. I think the best thing that we can do is make sure that I know what he's working on, he knows what I'm working on, everybody knows, so that basically we don't go in different directions. But if we all agree all the time, I don't think is a valuable use of time. I think it's just too difficult.
Yeah, actually the problem being a startup is you don't really have enough time to make all the decisions. Because if let's say I'm a banks, I'm a DBS, I have plenty of time, let's say 3 months or 6 months to make this decision. It's okay for me. But I'm running a startup. Actually, most of the startup, actually their burn rate is just like 10 months or 12 months. So I don't really have time to waste. What I can do is I have to make it, the choice is I have to make this decision. And what I can do later is to just change the decision very fast. Because I need to change the decision according to the situation. The situation just changes along the way. And that's also the good thing about the startups, because you need to keep eyes on the changes. You need to follow the trend. That's where actually most of the companies who are actually beaten up by the startups cannot do.
Yeah, hi. I was just looking at your website, right? And there was a frequently asked question about the number of WeChat users in Singapore, and I think it says that 1.2 million. Is that right? But it says that most of them, it says 1.2 million from tourists and local users. But then, there's another question which also asks about whether the WeChat Pay is allowed in Singapore. And I guess it's not yet allowed, right? So does that mean that most of the WeChat Pay users in Singapore are mainly by the tourists? And then maybe you can give us some insight as to why in Singapore it's still, the WeChat Pay is still not allowed. Okay. And maybe one last question is also about, is it true that FOMO Pay, so in the meantime, is also accepting Visa and MasterCard payments? Thanks.
Okay, for the WeChat, it's just one of the QR code payments that we are accepting. So the answer for your first question is WeChat Pay accepting in Singapore locally. The answer is currently only with the user with China registered bank card. Yes, that's the answer. Yeah, and one of the reasons why it's so, because the regulation, it's actually local banks, they cannot be the source of fund of the WeChat wallet currently. And this is some negotiation under the banks. Because for the source of fund, there are a few things you need to do. The first thing is anti-money laundering. I need to make sure that all my fund actually is trusted by the wallet. So right now, actually, WeChat only trusts all the local banks from China. And in order for them to open a wallet overseas, so this one will bring some change to their current structures. So this one will be the conversation between the banks. So for Singapore, how can I put the source of fund for my WeChat wallet? So the answer for this one is currently not. But for the Singaporean, definitely not all the Singaporeans they would like to use WeChat Pay alone, but you also have some of the local wallets here. So that's what's happening actually in most of the countries. Most of the countries they will have their own wallet. So Singapore here, Nets also launched their wallet. Not to mention all the banks, DBS, OCBC, UOB, and also Grab also just launched their wallet. So all of the countries, they will have their local wallet. So we have different wallets targeted at a different segmentation.
Hey, can I just take a step back to the earlier question about our expansion plans? Because Zack keeps mentioning WeChat. I don't want to give you guys the impression that we are a WeChat payment company, a technology. What our business model is about is it started out as basically being WeChat Pay, the Chinese payment systems. But the way we look at ourselves is we're basically a facilitator of alternate payments. So alternate payments, there are basically 14 wallets or 12 wallets in Singapore. There's 80 or 90 in India, there's 12 or 14. There's wallets everywhere. And basically the wallets are basically out there to service all the unbanked. So typically what happens is where I come from, most people actually have credit cards. In Asia, most people actually have hand phones, and then you go into the various countries and they all are walking around with hand phones but no credit cards, and they're getting used to these mobile payments. So the tailwind that we're trying to capitalize on and where our business is going is to be able to basically provide the infrastructure so that these mobile wallets can spend. So I don't want to leave you with the impression that we're purely a WeChat payment company. Basically what we are is we're the payment rail for alternate payments. And the reason that I say that is our lead-in is for WeChat. So the MVP that we actually have is WeChat. The marketing line that these guys have when they walk into a merchant, or at least it was last year, was, do you want to sell to more Chinese tourists? I mean, what merchant would say no? So the acceptance rate was really high. So that's why that actually, but now what we want to do is we start with WeChat, that's the MVP, and now we move into the next space of alternate payments. Again, if we offer credit cards, which we do for online, what's the competitive advantage? You can go to Stripe, you can go to PayPal. If you're bricks and mortar, you'll go to DBS and OCBC. I mean, maybe we can do it. I don't know. I think it'd be very hard to try to compete with them. But again, if we walk in and we basically say, do you want to capture the Chinese payment? And then next year I walk in and say, do you want to capture the increasingly affluent Asian spend? That's a very compelling argument. And basically that makes up maybe 5% of the spend in Singapore, maybe 2%. But the same thing, if you look at Amazon years ago, Amazon was a bookseller competing against Barnes & Nobles. Now look where Barnes & Nobles is and where Amazon is. So you basically have this entry point that allows you to get traction. That was the Chinese payments. Now basically we move to alternate payments. And then basically what we do is we offer a full suite eventually. So basically what we are is we're agnostic. Our business model is to facilitate the payment rails so that merchants can make sales. So that's what our compelling value proposition is trying to be.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing all your insights. It's been amazing. I love that the partnership both of you have, and it seems to be very much in sync. Would love to hear from either of you or both of you about a partnership which did not go so well, and what do you do about it when you realize that it was not good for the business?
What do you mean when the partnership doesn't go well?
In the sense when two people are not in sync in the leadership team towards the business objective.
One person just needs to suck it up.
Which one is that?
At the end of the day, basically, if you're married, you're not always in agreement with your spouse or siblings, parents. It's all the same relationship. maybe that's a little bit more of a personal level, but a business level relationship works the same way. We're two individuals, and sometimes we don't agree, but we have to go in one direction. So I mean, if I go back to my last company where myself and the founder and the company collapsed, I mean, we had, I wouldn't say we had disagreements. We basically, we didn't, I think, I'd rather not go into it. We basically, we parted on very good terms, even though we didn't agree along the way. And then basically in moments of stress, basically things got escalated. But I mean, at the end of the day, basically you just keep these things in context because you're all trying to work towards the same goal. So basically he wants to succeed, I want to succeed. It's just he thinks his way is better than mine, or I think my way is better than his, and at the end of the day, one way will prevail.
Yeah, just inside our office, sometimes we just shut down close the doors. Then we just argued a lot, but only internally. But when we walk out the door, okay, we at least know that's what's the decision make. So we all respect each other. So we only argue for some of the business point of view, yes. But everyone actually will find a point that because we are all doing it for good for the business. So nothing really is personal or something. So it's good always to voice out. At least we understand what's the opinion of each other. So we understand each other. And that's actually how, I think, how actually we can really make this relationship, especially as a long-term relationship, as a partnership, goes well.
I've been hearing a lot from either of you about the business model, about tapping the unbanked. So moving forward, what would be the locations that you plan to penetrate in the future other than Singapore or perhaps China? Because we know in Singapore, like your business model doesn't really, well, I'm not saying it doesn't work, but you have a lot of competitors. But hearing from you, you would like to tap the unbanked. What would be the potential locations that you would like to penetrate in the future?
Okay, so for the Singapore market, actually, there is no right or wrong. The problem is just the market is too small. So it's very hard for a company to survive just out of the business in Singapore market. And for our business model, very clear. What we are targeted is to the one who actually got a potential to accept the QR code or the mobile payment other than the credit card payment. So actually for all the Asia country, excepting the one which is a very developed, I mean, in the region, Australia and Hong Kong, it's very popular for the credit card. So you can just give it a miss. And for all the rest of the region, we are all building the partnerships, and we are actually doing some of the partnership with some of the financial institutions or non-financial institutions to use our service into one of their solutions. So this is actually where actually the partnership is already made.
Any plans to go beyond Asia? You know, like what you talked about earlier, Africa?
Yeah, a specific country, maybe I think can mention more.
Yeah, when I first started, there's tons of Chinese in North Africa, and I wanted to send Zack there, but he doesn't seem to want to go to the Congo.
Yeah, if you want to talk about some country specific, maybe we can talk about it later, because every country, especially in Southeast Asia, the problem is it's too special. Every country have its own local style.
We're too small to have we have a 3-year plan, but basically once the dust starts happening, basically the plan gets thrown out. So basically the lead-in, as I mentioned before, was, do you want to sell to more Chinese tourists? So that works really well. So that's what we're going to replicate when we move to these other markets. So partner with other people and use that as the lead-in. So that will be where we're focusing initially. Now, as we start to build out alternate wallets and our flows start to change or our model starts to change, we just rebalance and say, basically, where do we think we're going to have the maximum penetration? But I kid you not, North Africa has tons of Chinese nationals living there. So it would be a very good place to go. Americas, I don't think would be a very good place to go because I think it's an ultra competitive marketplace, and I think basically Americans are just used to credit cards. And so we just prioritize the next market that we're going to go to based on where we think we're going to get maximum bang for buck. And we might disagree, but at the end of the day, we just have to pick one because we don't have deep pockets, so we'd have to pick one market, and that's where we go until we basically generate more money.
Got a question about the technology, and I know 3 years is a long time, but from your perspective, like from a payment perspective, how do you see that the technology on payment will change? And sometimes you hear people saying, oh, we all have a smartphone, we have a mobile phone, but in the future, we may not even have a phone, stuff like that. So I mean, I'm just curious about your perspective on that.
Okay, I think that's a very good question because this is also something MES, the central bank, is also discussing about. The problem about I'm answering your question from the regulator point of view. It's about which kind of technology or which kind of standard should I use for the payment. Because along the way, for the Visa, MasterCard, even you also have a different standards. Maybe you didn't notice, but actually there are already a few generations changed in your so-called credit card. Previously, it's like a magnetic stripe, or something is chip, or somewhere now it's NFC, just the PayWave or something. But for the QR code, it's also the same problem. You will see it's as just a code, but behind the code, actually there are different standards behind. The first standard released by WeChat or Alipay or even Paytm is using the same. It's URL based. So this one is very convenient to use. But the problem is of being convenient, its security will be compromised. So that's why the regulator definitely doesn't want to use URL based. So which standard should I use? Nets actually, it's since it's the uniform of all the local banks, so Nets also launched its own standard. So it's different from the URL standard. So they want to unify the different standards used by, let's say, DBS or CBC or UOB. And there is another conversation ongoing between, even beyond the banks, which is at a card scheme level, which is at a Visa, MasterCard, or UnionPay, this level. Because they are the one who knows the card business for more than 50 years, more than anyone in the market. So they developed the new standard actually for the point of view from the security. So the security is the highest one. And this one can actually give no compromise to any of the other standard. So this is called EMA code standard. And right now, actually, this standard, MAS, they are trying to adapt into. But the problem of being too secure is also convenient will be compromised. So you need to find a balance in between the convenience and the security. If it's too secure, well, if you just enter the password of, let's say, more than 20 digits, will you use it or not? But if you just use a password of, let's say, 3 digits or 3 digits, will you use it? So it's the same from the regulator point of view. I need to find a balance, and I cannot make one standard alone in this industry. And I need to make the change maybe during the which like a period or something.
Last question?
Hi, my name is Trisha, and I'm in digital marketing. I have a question on education. Are you guys doing, I think it's quite obvious Singapore is quite slow towards adopting cashless payment as a form of payment. Is there anything you guys are doing as a company to educate possible future users of cashless payment?
Okay. Actually, as a member of SGTR task force, this is one of our responsibility. We are actually trying to push this cashless society concept. We actually got a few. The first one, because the problem is for us is we are not really consumer facing. So we are more focusing on the merchant side. So what we can do is educate more about the merchant acceptance. Because as a consumer, if you don't have enough acceptance point, for example, if you now want to go to one of the shopping mall, but this shopping mall does not accept the payment mode you want to use it also. So what we are focused on is on the merchant side. So we regularly actually conduct a lot of training for the SME merchant. But meanwhile, for some MNC or for some chain brands, this one actually we also have some of the partnership deals. Means actually we sometimes also participate a lot of like exhibition or some of the event trying to bring the awareness of the QR code acceptance to all of this enterprise client. And for the consumer side, actually, it will done by the wallet side, which is maybe you will see a lot of like advertisement done by Sintel Dash or DBS, Payla, or recently Grab Pay. They are doing a lot of education at the consumer side, and actually we are responding them from the merchant side.
I think that's a good place to leave it. Zack and Alan, thank you so much for your time and your insights. It was very, very interesting. Just before we go, our next event is next week, 1 week from now, here with Justin Dry. He's the co-founder of Vino Mofo. I don't know if you've seen their ads all over Facebook, but they're a wine delivery service, and they're pretty much disrupting the traditional model. And because it's such a close event, use the promo code 2-for-1. That's all one word, 2-for-1. And you'll get 20% off general admission tickets. We already sold out of early birds within like 2 days, so it should be a very good event, and we'll have wine as well from them. So, but thank you again. Let's give them a round of applause for a really interesting discussion. Help yourself to some more food and drinks, and we hope to see you guys next week.